been talked about enough, because I think African pain and African suffering has been normalised. When people think Africa, they do think war, they think famine, they think starvation. So it's almost like, oh, this is normal for
my fellow South Sudanese. Our country is about to go into full-blown civil war. If you are not aware of what's going on in South Sudan, pay close attention.
Talk about Sudan today because according to the UN humanitarian chief, Sudan is facing one of the worst humanitarian crises in the world that has been seen in the recent past. So this means that whatever Sudan is going through is so much worse than whatever is happening in Gaza. Yet, if my feed is anything to go by, we need to talk about it more. So, hi guys, welcome to the Shift Podcast. My name is Wambui, and like, share, subscribe, and all that jazz. But I really want us to talk about how Sudan has gotten where it is today. Even if we know Sudan as a country that sometimes is marred by a lot of civil war, but then the thing that I will stand on forever is saying that civil war or civil unrest does not cause war. Like, people cannot be mad enough for that long to fund a war for that long. It takes people who are gaining, especially economically, to be able to fund a war in whatever state that people are in. So the state that Sudan is in today was mostly driven when there was a civic uprising, if you may put it as such. So what happened is a lot of people in Sudan were very unsatisfied with how their previous president, Omar al-Bashir, was running their country, because the division of resources had been only to the people who are quote-unquote Arab Africans. And also that's also a very diabolical term to call people Arab of Africa, and also the fact that they are Arab gives them like privileges such as having better services in a country that is supposed to be African. But then again, that's also something that we can also now trace back to colonization. But then again, I usually feel like right now, where we are at right now, we can at least take responsibility of some of the things we do. So as we know, a lot of people in North Africa believe there's a supremacy. No, not a lot of people. Like, the people who are some sort of Arab-looking people in North Africa believe that they're superior, or there's some sort of supremacy, or there is a narrative that they are more superior than the black ones, like the Nubian guys, like the South Sudan guys, as we've come to know here in Kenya. So if we go back some years back, let's say, when was it? During the 2001 secession in Sudan, that was the division between North Sudan and South Sudan, right? We can remember that because that led to a lot of refugees being distributed among the East African countries. Even in Kenya, we are lucky enough to have also even gone to school with a lot of people who are from South Sudan. The problem is, after the secession of the South Sudan, the problem that was there did not end. You see? So when Omar al-Bashir continued to be in power, there was still like an equal distribution of the economic resources in Sudan, right? So that led to the unrest, or the civic unrest, that happened in 2003, right? Yeah. So, and then also to add a dash of it, that Omar al-Bashir has been a dictator in Sudan since 1989 to 2019. Yeah, that's something to think about. So I think now the people in Sudan had enough of this guy, and they were like, no, we are done with you and we cannot continue with you. Now I think what happened now is, like, there was an uprising in Sudan, the same that we have had in the June 25th in 2005 here in Kenya, that you're so tired of the current sitting government or the unequal treatment of citizens or something like that, so you plan an uprising. So fortunately or unfortunately, what happened after that is Omar al-Bashir was actually ousted out of power. But then again, politically, if you look at it, he was ousted out of power because there was a collaboration between the RSF which was a military faction that was previously called the Janjaweed, that was also playing a key role when they were fighting the South Sudan. Like it's a chain that goes back and back and back. And you realize that nothing is new in this society or in our world or anything that happens anyway. So the RSF went against the Sudan Armed Forces. No, I think they collaborated. Yes, from what I read, I think they collaborated and got rid now of the president, because I'm thinking if you're the president of a country, like it's either your army is protecting you or you have some sort of army that is there to protect you, right? Yes. So, unfortunately, Omar al-Bashir was ousted out of power, and which brought a gap in South Sudan. But the thing is, and I keep on saying, is civilians cannot be mad to fight for a whole month. You see, like there has to be to get to a point where we sit down and we decide that this is not working anymore, and then now we come up with a solution, because all of us need to go back to our lives. However, with a war, any war that is happening right now, it is funded by people who are paying the soldiers, buying the armory, and also people who are gaining economically from the unrest that's happening, right? So now what happened in South Sudan, because there was a gap and there was unrest. So ideally, or obviously, like if your current sitting president is not in power, they put in a guy, I've forgotten his name when I was researching. They put in a guy who was later like, just people just got rid of him, so that now the Sudan Armed Forces, which was led by Abel al-Burhan, to take now Khartoum, because that was the capital, because there's no longer a president. However, there's this guy, the former head of the Janjaweed, now called the RSF, now who we have come to know as Hemeti, because he has become quite popular here in Kenya because of the meeting he had with our president, right? And because if you like take a while and do some sort of some small research, and you see what has been happening, is you can see that he's been a very huge player in the gold trade from Sudan and to now the UAE. That's something also that I'd really like also to talk about that, because no, let me put a pin on that. I will come back to that later. But what happened, because there was a gap after the war, after ushering out the current president. So now what happened was, now the two majors, or the two head of the armies, of the two, one is the RSF, which is not the official army, but remember it was some sort of army that was also working for the previous president, because they were fighting for him in the previous like civil unrest. And now the sitting army, the Sudan Armed Forces, that is here. So who takes over the capital? Now there's that war. That is what is happening right now, because there is a war between the actual armed forces and now the RSF, who were by their own right also want power in Sudan, which is actually quite sad if you ask me. Because what has that led? It has led to like millions and millions of displacement of people in Sudan. And Sudan has experienced something that I do not think anybody so far in whichever country you live in should ever have to experience. Because right now the way it is, because, and also the media is not also allowed to get in. So the information that is out there is very skewed, but channels like the DW, Al Jazeera and all that, they report as much as they can. But the thing is, there is also widening conflict. But if you ask me, the reason that there is widening conflict in Sudan is because of the economic gain. There is no war in this world that is fought for because we want to reign supreme or something like that, or because a particular race is better than whatever race. I don't know. Because if you ask me, the whole reason that there are people who are being trained how to kill people, and they are being funded, like they have the money and they have the armory to do that, like they have guns, they have the state-of-the-art guns to kill, because they have been killing, and there is a very huge conflict that's happening, is because somebody is gaining. Now, this information is actually available like publicly, because if you look at it and why Hemeti has now become one of the key players in the war is because he has become one of the richest. He's amassed a lot of wealth. And I can see why, because if you look at it, if anybody tells you what you think about when you think about the United Arab Emirates, you can think about the gold and all that. But then again, do they have any gold mines? Do we sit down and ask ourselves, how is it that these people have any sort of gold? They do not have any mines, so where do they get them? See? So if it is South Sudan, they have, and they are currently warring and there is conflict, and they have a lot of guns, all these things to fight with, they don't make any of that. So where do they get them from? You see? So there has to be an explanation of why such things are happening. It's quite unfortunate. It's very unfair, even to like the people of the country. When you see people talk about their country, well, they are very broken-hearted because their country has become something that they never thought. Now it's all about the atrocities that are happening to everybody. It's all about the humanitarian crisis and the famine that's happening. But the thing again, why there is also famine in South Sudan or in Sudan, essentially, is a lot of the warring areas are places where there was like the agricultural basket of the country. So if it is warring, so who's supposed to produce the food in that country? Who's supposed to do that? And also the fact that there is a humanitarian collapse, it means that aid cannot enter the country. If you do go and read up on what is happening in that country, you will see that whatever that is happening in Sudan is worse than whatever is happening in Gaza. But I do not want to complain that and say that people are not talking about it, because that is where I want to talk about it too. I want to remove the concept of Africans that it is somebody else's obligation to talk about or to do a small thing or to create awareness of the things that are affecting us as Africans. Because it could easily be us. It could easily be Kenya. It could easily be Uganda. It could easily be Zambia or whatever country that goes through whatever Sudan has gone through. But Africa goes through these civil wars. And when you hear somebody calling something a civil war, just know that the reason why there is a civil war is because there is money being fought for. It has nothing to do with the well-being of the people. The one thing you can do is follow the money. And once you follow the money, then you can see that the whole reason that a lot of people fight in Africa, it's the same thing that's happening in the Congo and all that. If people are fighting for the people of Congo to have like a good life or to be able to live a great quality of life, they will have by now. But unfortunately, there are so many economic factors that come into play. But the hugest economic factor that comes into play in Africa and the civil war is that the outside people, the outside country never want to buy the minerals in this country or in this continent at a fair price. That's it. They just want to loot. They just want to take it. And when you hear there is a country having a civil war is now like a distraction, because it becomes now something that you're focusing on, and they can get whatever materials they need away from a country. No, there is no civil community or civic community, especially Africans, that can have a war for more than like a week or 10 days. It's not even viable economically for anybody to do that. It's always something that's engineered and something that we need to also sit down and think about it and do better. Anyway, that's it for me. Thank you for watching the Shift Podcast. Goodbye.